Hey friends, believe it or not, it is Wednesday, and that means it is Ask a Flower Farmer. And guess what else? If you didn't notice, today is my birthday, and this is a sign of the kind of culture that we have here at the Gardener's Workshop. I have been crowned. I have necklaces. So this is what I came to this morning. And on top of it all, my sister and I share an office here. She actually cleaned our office. So I am pretty stoked about that. So what Wednesday Ask a Flower Farmer is all about is that I do my best to answer your questions about flower farming, growing cut flowers, farm dogs, business, whatever you got, folks. Bring it on and I'll do my best. But you need to be sure and post those questions down in the bubble with the question mark. That way I don't have to scroll through everybody's name and perhaps miss your question. And thank you everyone for all the birthday greetings. I will tell you that it has been a whopper of a day already. Tucker is trying to eat one of my props. You rascal. He just ate the tape off the rug that marks the spot where our camera goes when we produce videos. Crazy boy. Tucker, stop that. Sorry, y'all. This is the reality. So I will do my best to answer your questions, and I want to talk about something today that it kind of tricked in my mind this morning. So it's April 13th. Our last expected frost date is typically mid-April. That means that it doesn't mean that it's warm enough to plant everything. It means that typically you don't get a hard frost after that date is what that date is all about. So, and our grow room is exploding with transplants. I still have some cool flower experiments going on, but we have a ton of warm season stuff. Really tons of marigolds, tons of cosmos, a bunch of celosias, all this trial growing that we're doing. And so our grow room is exploding. So I'm always, chomping at the bit. When can we start planting some of these warm season things? So this morning led me to hit the button on my weather app to show the 2-week forecast. And in fact, we have some gorgeous days coming up. I think it's supposed to go to 80 today. But those are not the important temperatures, friends. It's the nighttime temperatures that we have to focus on. Put aside, the warm days are the icing on the cake. It's the nighttime temperatures that we are really looking at. They're the ones that cause the problems and create the good stuff. Well, my next 2 weeks, nighttime temperatures are still in the high 40s and 50s. We don't recommend planting warm season tender annuals outside until it is 60 or above at night and holding, unless you're going to take some heroic steps. And that's what I want to talk about today. So, especially because of those warm days that I see coming, which means when you do what I'm about to tell you, it really is worth all the benefits to do it. So, we will be planting our first recipe of warm season tender annuals early, because we're going to take these steps. Primarily, that means that the beds will be covered in Bio 360 with the black side up. And that's assuming the daytime temperatures are not going to be going over 85 degrees. And we are going to hoop and cover them. And so my plan is this. We're going to hoop and cover. And those covers will stay up 24/7 unless it gets too hot during the day. Then I may vent them, because you don't want to toast what's underneath there. But here's what happens, friends. The row cover blocks the wind, and the black film really kind of revs up the temperatures underneath there, and then the cover just kind of holds it all in there, and it gives just enough protection at night that they don't feel quite as chilly as what those temperatures are. Because no, those nighttime temperatures will not kill your warm season tender annuals. Most often, basil won't tolerate below like 48 degrees without sustaining damage. But what's the point of planting early if you don't get an early benefit? And the only way to get a benefit is to give it that nighttime protection. So what I kind of wanted to say today is that for me, row covers have a life. it's like in each and every season, they play a really different role. So this is the role that we're going into now. We're going to be covering this warm stuff to give it the nighttime protection. It also is kind of convenient that it also protects from bunnies, which we have a plethora of bunnies this year. And deer too, that'll also deter them from at least walking around on my beds. So in the early spring, we use row covers and hoops, not only for cold protection, but for major spring winds. So row cover for me is really, really essential. And Rhonda has brought me, we sell the 50 footers. And here's a piece. So we use the lightweight row cover, and then there are heavier weights. The reason I don't use the heavier weights is you have more options with the lightweight. So you can really see through this. I mean, I don't know if you can see me or not, but pretty much 85% of air, water, and light go through this. If I ever feel the need that I need extra protection, I just double it. That just gives me more options in using this, and it's really difficult. You wouldn't imagine this until you really start farming. If you have more than one weight on your farm, it's a constant case of confusion of which is it. They don't really look that much different from each other. So the row covers are super useful in the lightweight version at this time of the year, where you just really want to protect from the wind, a little bit of nighttime protection, but most of all, you just want to block that wind to create this amazing little hub underneath there for your warm season tender annuals to grow. Because if they get cold every night, if you don't do anything, it kind of like by the time they recover from that the next day, they get cold again the next night. There's just no benefit. So that's kind of what I wanted to share. And do y'all like the crown? These are the standard, whenever it's your birthday and you work here, you have to wear this all day. So I'm sitting in my office alone with this cloak on, y'all. All right. And so the other thing I want to say, especially when you are fighting wind with row cover, you can go to thegardenersworkshop.com, go to the store and go to row cover. There's several sizes. We sell them, I think there's 500, 250 feet, and 50 foot. And check out the weight bags. That's what these are. These are nothing but sand bags, and you fill them with sand, soil, or whatever you have. We do gravel sometimes. 15 pounds. If you try to use clips, rocks, or boards, particularly when it's windy, it will rip the heck out of your row cover. It's not made to do that. So that's the lowdown on how we get stuff so much earlier. I mean, we typically would be cutting zinnias almost, before the end of May, and that's why. We start them indoors. We plant out 2 to 3 week old plants. Then we give them some cover so that they can really get a good start and hit the ground running, and it'll work on all your crops. All right, friends, let's look at some questions here. So great question. Petal Pusher Flower Farms is asking, how do you store your row covers? Well, funny you should ask that, and maybe you are asking it because you saw the reel. We've always, that building on my farm that's on the cover of Cool Flowers, the little inn, that's kind of our storage place for stuff, our hard goods. And so we've always just used these big plastic fencing rounds that we just throw the row covers in there. We ball them up and throw them in. Well, I will tell you, that's a really great attraction for rodents. Tucker, stop. For rodents can really get in there and have a heyday. So Christine had the great idea that the big cardboard rolls that our Bio 360 comes on, we buy these huge rolls, right? Would be great to roll our row cover up onto. And that's what we've started to do. And that does several things. It compresses how much space they take up. It really isn't very conducive for rodents to get in it. So that's how we store it inside that building out of UV rays. UV rays are what break everything down. Plastics, everything. Rhonda's currently chasing Tucker around. Oh my goodness, this dog. So that is how we store our row covers. Oop. What gauge wire do you use for your hoops? Do you know, isn't it number 9? You'd have to go to our website and look. I mean, I use the pre-arched wire, and I will tell you the big difference. I used to use PVC, like PEX, PEX, which is flexible PVC pipe, which of course my husband being a plumber, I had access to lots of that. But it's so much bigger. It was the 1/2 inch or even the 1/4 inch, I think. It's harder to push those in the ground, even with a point cut on them. I just find that the wire is more stable, and we use the heck out of them. I mean, I have hundreds of those babies. Remember to post your questions down in the bubble with the question mark. How is your sunflower experiment going? When do you plan to plan out your first round? So Casablanca is asking about the early bird sunflowers. So we've already planted them. So we started sunflowers 6 weeks before our expected frost, which would have been 6 weeks ago from this week. And then we plant our sunflower transplants at 3 weeks old. So we have 3 plantings actually in the ground. 2 of them have been row covered and hooped. 1 of them is not, as an experiment. And so they're doing great, you know. So we will see how that all pans out. And thanks for asking. My Lizzianthus seems to be sunburned. I had lightweight row cover on them, but didn't want to get hot, especially on the 80-degree day. Any suggestion on why they seem burnt? It might be burnt, or, I mean, certainly sunburn can do that, like that tan. I would take a picture and post it. I would send it. I mean, this is where our extension agents are really, really helpful, y'all. Connect with your local extension agent. Say, hey, I got a funny looking something on some of my transplants. Can I send you an image? And they'll say, oh, that might be XYZ, or yeah, that looks like sunburn. That's what I do. So I am by no means an expert on that, but that's possible. If you had it covered with 80 degrees, perhaps they got a little toasted. But that's a guess. Small home grower here. I'm testing a small amount of sunflowers too. Yay! Do you think they will be okay with some clear plastic bins as a makeshift cold frame at night? That is possible, Julie, for sure. But what you just need to remember is if you forget to take those plastic air trapping containers off, they'll be toast by 2 o'clock the next day. They'll get overheated and cook them. That's why we don't use any plastic. For that very reason, because I'm not a very attentive, people are kind of surprised by this. There is so much to be done on a flower farm that, we just don't use methods that can have such catastrophic results if I forget about it. So yes, it would work if you put it on late in the day and took it, in the evening, and then take it off first thing in the next morning, but it won't take long for them to toast in that situation. They would need to be vented. Hi, Lisa. Soil blocking for the first time this year. Great germinations, but seedling seems to have stalled. Any idea? That is a common concern or question I get from folks. And I tell people there's about 4 or 5 areas that could cause that. The number one most common is the watering habits. If the soil blocks are staying moist all the time, that just is not conducive to healthy growing. They should go through that in a 24-hour period, go from moist when you water them in the morning, which is the best time to water, so that they can go through the day while the lights are on or they're outside, so they can suck up all that water and then dry out by the next morning. If that's not happening, I can almost promise you that's what the problem is. So watering habits, not warm enough. We kind of like right now, my grow room is closed up, which probably is a mistake, but I have a mouse in my building and I didn't want him to get in there and get my sunflowers. So that room is going to get really warm in there. And as long as my blocks were adequately watered that morning, those plants grow so much quicker. So more heat once we're into this time of the year, when you're growing warm season plants or you're trying to vegetatively grow plants, that is the best. Of course, 16 hours of light. We use Neptune's Harvest seaweed fish in the watering can once a week. So good light, good food, watering habits, and temperature is what it's really all about. So I would look at one of those and tweak something. Hi, Lisa. Looking for guidance on thinning larkspur delphiniums. I oversowed like you recommended in the fall, and I've had amazing germination. Don't you hate it when it happens that way? What spacing do you recommend? I do have your Japanese hand hoe. Should I just do like you did in the video? I'll admit these plants are lush and tall now. So funny you should say that, because I'm getting ready to do this to my giant poppy pods. So, about every 6 inches you want to have a plant. And you could go a little bit closer than that if you wanted to, but I know how hard it is to pull out all those little extras because they look really healthy right now. But in our experience, as they start to elongate and they start fighting for food, water, and light, they get very unhealthy pretty quick. So the recommended spacing is a plant every 6 inches. I would say to you, if you want to go every 4 inches, if you have healthy soil and you're irrigating, and you have good nutrition, then you could go probably every 4 inches. But yeah, so what I do in that picture is I would go through and just rake a hole between what are going to ultimately be 2 plants 6 inches apart. Use the hoe to get the most out, and then hand pull if there's clusters. Those clusters look good when they're babies, but they do not produce great stems. Hi, do you put out probably sunflowers right in the ground, or do you harden them off? If you harden, how long? So that's a good question, Joanne. So typically, wow, it says it wouldn't share that. So in normal sunflower season, like we've just hit now, it's 80 degrees today. As soon as my sunflowers sprout in the grow room off of the seedling heat mat, they go right outside onto the porch. So they're outside growing until they're planted at 2 to 3 weeks old. So they are being hardened off at the same time. For my early bird that were growing indoors, for a longer period of time because it was too cold outside, we did pop them out on the porch for a couple of 3 days at least before they were planted out in the garden. However, they were hooped and covered immediately, so that allows hardening off in the actual garden. So hope that helps. I'll be planting my dahlias out soon. I pre-sprouted them in my garage to give them a head start. That's going to make it hard to plant in Bio 360. Do you always plant dahlias in Bio 360? Can I be successful without Bio 360? Yes, you surely can. And so here's the thing. You don't want to plant dahlias, not in the south where we are, with the black side up, because when they start performing in mid to late summer, that will just toast them. I've actually made that mistake and don't want you to follow me there. So I would probably use mulch, or if you're going to use Bio 360, make your hole as big as you need to make it, and then put down mulch all over your bed. Not as deep as you would have to block weeds if you didn't use Bio 360. That's one of the experiments that we're doing this year. We have access to a ton of nice mulch that was dumped on our farm, which I've never had before. So we've been putting Bio 360 down and then just putting a light layer of mulch on top of it. Not only does it make it look better for imaging, which is very important to me, but it breaks that heat barrier. So that's what I would do if I was planting dahlias. I would put it down. If you have white on or gray on one side, black on the other, put the gray side up, plant them, and then you can always mulch them. And that way you could also mulch the hole that you have to make bigger. So hopefully that'll help you. All right. Do you open your frost cloth during the day and close up at night, or leave them covered all day? That's a really great question. Normally, we do not vent during the day, unless, like what I'm getting ready to do as I'm trying to plant my warm season stuff earlier, a couple weeks earlier, and we're planting into Bio 360, black side up. then I would vent during the day if the temperatures were rising above 75 degrees probably. But normally we use row covers with the intention that we're not venting them. But that is definitely, you do not want to overheat what is underneath there. During the fall and during winter and very early spring, that's not really a concern. This time of the year, it really is. Little Meadow Flower Farm, please help me figure out how to succession plant my sunflowers in such a small garden. I have 4 successions sown, 2 planted out, but only have 8 20-foot rows in main garden. The bane of all of our existence. We never have enough room. So first off, at Clubhouse today, at 1 o'clock, where I don't know if you know about Clubhouse, is just an audio social media app. I do a talk over there at 1 o'clock every Wednesday following this. Today I'm talking about succession planting. So I will tell you in a nutshell the way that we used to use entire 100-foot beds for each week's planting back when we were in high production. So that made it simple. You just had to have enough beds. But now that we do these small incremental plantings, we prepare an entire bed, and then we use silage tarp, and we plant our sunflowers for this week, and then we cover the rest of the bed with silage tarp. And then with each passing week, we just fold the silage tarp back to do the next planting. And that way, the silage tarp keeps the bed from growing weeds. You know, it blocks water, it blocks light, and that is a super efficient way to do it. To say, all right, I don't know how many of your beds, if you added all your sunflowers up, how many beds that would take of what you have. And I have to look at your question again. You have 8 20-foot beds. So let's just say, if I have no idea what you're planting, but if you plant enough sunflowers that one whole bed after like 6 weeks would be full, that's what I would do. The other way we do it is, as cool flower crops start finishing, we start pulling out crops and sticking in sunflowers. So, but that's what I think I would do, is pick a bed, prepare it, designate it for sunflowers, cover it with silage tarp, and see how it goes. Question: how do you compete with florists that ship their sunflowers in for 70 cents a stem? Well, first off, I don't sell wholesale for 70 cents a stem. In fact, it's almost twice that. And they need samples of the difference in the quality. First off, people that if a customer has said that to you, that's not always our customer. So it took me, I've told the story many times, I think, in flower farming school. When I first started doing high production sunflowers, it took me like a year to train my customers, because I heard that over and over, not the cheap price, but I heard say, oh, we just get those from a wholesaler. And I'm sure they were cheaper. So each week when I delivered the rest of their flowers, I always included a couple of bunches of my sunflowers. First off, I wasn't selling them. Why would you throw them away instead of trying to bait your customers, right? And I'm telling you, it took about a year to really get them on board. But the following year, that's when we started having customers that took 10, 15 standing order a week bunches of sunflowers. And here's the other thing that I also learned. A lot of my customers that first year when I was courting them, as you might want to say, they had committed to a grower. They had said, they got that price because they said, I'll take the next 30 weeks. So they can't really even get out of it. So you have to go into it knowing that. But I had to warm up. I mean, it's like getting a date, right? You don't marry somebody after a date. You have to date them. And that's exactly what I did. And it paid off big for us. So let's see what this is. That's not the right one. Wait a minute. I'm trying to go back to my questions. I just lost one. Oh, here it is. Do you ever use white reflective landscaping cover for cool flowers? I've never heard of that, and we don't use any type of permanent ground cover. Here in the South, the perennial weed pressure is beyond belief. And interestingly enough, I just, Amelia of Rooted Farmers, if you know what that is, it's like Etsy for flower farmers. She developed this amazing online marketing place. Anyway, Amelia just did a brand new course for us. If you haven't checked it out, if you're a flower farmer and you want to sell flowers, you need to check out Collectives 101. Amelia is the expert in our industry on that, and she just did an on-demand course with us. Anyway, she came and visited me this past weekend. She lives in New Hampshire. Her family came to Williamsburg. She came down, and it was just interesting to talk to her. She said, "Why don't you like landscape fabric?" The growing conditions difference in New Hampshire and in Virginia is like night and day difference. Our perennial weed pressure and our long growing season, it is 10 times more work for me to try to grow in landscape cloth than it is to grow without it, because the weeds get in it and it's just really a mess. So sorry, I don't have any answer for you other than to say I have never used that. I didn't know they had it. And it just, for here in the South, it is just a real, we have better ways of doing it. Hunt Country Flowers, do you thin larkspur? We just talked about that. What direct seeded plants do you not thin? So I don't thin Iceland poppies or Nigella. I don't thin Bupleurum much. All of those crops that are like one stem and done, you know, they don't branch and go on to grow. I definitely thin giant poppy pods. I thin bells of Ireland. When I don't thin bells of Ireland, they look really great, but then they bloom really short. I mean, they really need their space, even though I just get one jumbo stem out of them. They're definitely worth it. And I cannot comment on Etriplex. Etriplex is definitely a challenge. Direct seeding it late in the fall, it needs cold temperatures, but we can get it to germinate, but the deer eat it to the darn ground. I mean, it's in the spinach family, right? So one year I'll plant it in the right spot and we'll get it, but this past year they ate it all gone. So I cannot comment on that. Let's see. I can't say enough about planting crimson clover. My clay soil looks amazing. Thank you. Hey, funny you should ask that. So if y'all haven't heard, we are actually having an open farm and an open warehouse on May 7th. This is a last minute thing. We had been saying we're not doing it because my home is under construction. I mean, having a project done on it. And there's been so many delays that we think we can squeeze it in. Yes, friends, I know it's the day before Mother's Day. It was either do it that day or not do it at all this year. So you can check if you're on our email list. If you're not on our email list, you need to go to our website and sign up. There's a big email coming out Wednesday afternoon with all the details of that. It'll be totally rockin' fun. And we were just talking this morning about they're packaging up tons of extra stuff because we sell so much in the open house because people come and don't have to pay shipping, right? And they get to shop our shelves, y'all. I mean, it's like the funnest thing ever. Anyway, they were asking me, do you think we need to package crimson clover? And the answer was yes, because crimson clover is a cool season hardy annual. You probably typically do fall plant it. If your winters don't go below -10, you need to fall plant it. If you do go below, then you plant it in very early spring. But it's a great opportunity to buy seed without paying shipping, especially if you're buying, volumes of it. Anyway, crimson clover is the bomb. It's my go-to cool season hardy annual cover crop. And buckwheat is the other one, which we also package and have that ready for you also. So cover cropping, people, I don't recommend it for brand new growers because you have to figure it out. But once you get growing, then you incorporate it into your succession, and it does really great. And I want to remind you again that join me on Clubhouse at 1 o'clock, and I'm talking succession planting, and you can ask questions. What crops do deer love the most? I'll avoid. Well, let me just tell you. It really depends on where you are, because I probably shouldn't even say this out loud, but since I'm not on my property, I can say it. Deer do not eat sunflowers on my farm. Why is that? I mean, they eat sunflowers everywhere else. It is very regionally based. You need to ask that question to your local master gardeners. Most of them, many of the states actually have what they consider deer-resistant plants, but if they're starved enough, they'll eat anything. But for me and cool flowers, I have found that they do not eat snapdragons. They don't typically eat larkspur and calendula. What do they eat? They eat campanula to the ground. Just thinking, it's hard to remember all that stuff, but Atriplex they eat for sure. I will say that the majority, we don't do anything for deer anymore. So anything that gets really gobbled up, I typically don't grow unless I'm trying to get a picture of it like Atriplex. So anything you see me growing and farming, you can pretty much count on the deer pretty much leave it alone. They do eat crimson clover, by the way. So this is going to be my last question because it's after 12. And this is a good one. Hi, Lisa. Am I just too small to make a living at farming? Only about 15 beds of different sizes currently. I'm just loving that you asked this question because I talk about this. There's just always just too much for me to talk about most of the time, whether it's growing or business. It 100 depends on your choices, Little Meadow Flower Farm. So if I only had 15 beds and I wanted to actually make money selling flowers, you have to be focused. You have to kind of like niche down on what you're doing. 15 beds, depending on how big they are, is definitely big enough to have a nice subscription service or to sell at a little farmer's market. But let me tell you what I see people doing. So if I was you, I would stick with the model that I have followed for 24 years, and that is where I primarily only grow annuals. You get the biggest bang for your buck. It's the low investment, high return. As I will still remember the day that Frank said this, Frank Arnowski, who is a good friend, he and I were speaking, I think we were in Michigan or somewhere, and he spoke before me, and we were speaking to 100% new grower flower farmers, and Frank was showing the slides of what he grows, and people kept asking questions. Well, don't you grow ranunculus? Don't you grow anemones? Don't you grow lilies? Don't you grow whatever? He said, I do grow all of those, but let me tell you, it took me a lot of years to build my business to grow them, and I make more money growing sunflowers than I do from those things in profit margin. It's low investment, high return. And that's where people go astray. I talk to people that are just starting out. They spend a lot of money on tulips, a lot of money on bulbs, dahlias, all of these high investment crops. They either don't have a lot of customers yet or they don't have much space. If you really want to grow flowers and you want to make money, you have got to learn how to do it efficiently and well, and the way to do that is by starting out growing annuals and learn the business. Then if you say, all right, I've figured it out, now I want to add some tulips, and you learn, because you don't have much space, that you actually don't even grow tulips in the ground. You grow them in bulb crates, which means you have extra space you can do that in. So many people just jump in and invest a lot of money. I'm literally here to tell you that you can, for a very small amount of money, invest in seeds, and I'll sound like a dinosaur here, literally a wheelbarrow, a shovel, some compost, and seeds, and some seed starting equipment, and you can do it, So it's all depends about how you keep yourself in check. And actually, I'm not sure if it's out yet. Somebody else schedules a podcast now, but I just did one that talks about managing you. And that is what it's about. It's about keeping ourselves in line with what our goals are. And, it's all about sticking to the plan. And yes, I think you can earn money. You can earn a profit, but you just have to stick with your plan. Sorry, that went kind of off rabbit hole there. All right, friends, I'm off here now. I'll be back on Clubhouse at 1 o'clock. We're now going to have a birthday party. Thank you all for such sweet greetings. Having a great day. And I can't wait to, connect again. And remember, Saturdays, I stream live on YouTube and Facebook at 11 a.m. Eastern time. But you can see the replays on both of those channels. What helps me the most, friends, is if you invite your friends to this, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Whatever methods or platforms you're on, To actually follow and interact is what helps us the most. All right, folks, until we meet again. Ciao.